You rely on this podcast to stay informed and connected with your local community, and we rely on you. Without listener support, this show simply wouldn't exist. Be a part of the team that makes this show possible by donating to our home, KUOW. It only takes a minute. Donate at KUOW.org or follow the link in the show notes. And thank you.
You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. The summertime is usually peak season for tourists in Stehekin, Washington, a small community of around 100 people at the north end of Lake Chelan. It's only accessible by boat or float plane, making it an ideal place for a lakeside getaway or entry into the North Cascades wilderness. But the geography and topography that makes Stehekin unique are now posing challenges as the Pioneer wildfire continues to threaten the town. Since it started in June, the fire has grown to tens of thousands of acres, at one point spreading to within 100 feet of buildings near Stehekin. No structures have burned so far, and they won't if Stan Hinatsu has anything to say about it. Stan is the public information officer on the latest incident management team responding to the Pioneer and Easy fires. There have been 6 teams tagging in on this fire so far. Stan is with the Northwest Incident Management Team 3. And thank you so much for being here this morning. I know things are busy. Really appreciate your time.
Great to be here. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
So as of Friday, we understand that the fire was just over 38,000 acres and still making movement towards Stehekin. What is the latest from over the weekend? How is that Pioneer fire behaving right now, and how are your crews responding?
Yeah, so the fire hasn't grown significantly since Friday, and as you know, we did have some weather roll in on Saturday, some severe thunderstorms and rain. Surprisingly, it didn't get a significant amount of rain, but still temperatures are lower, humidities are higher, so fire activity has really moderated at this point. And the fire is sort of perched above the Stehekin Valley at this point and has not really moved significantly either up valley or down towards the homes in the valley. So right now what we're doing is the previous team had put in a retardant line just between Boulder Creek and Rainbow Creek on this prominent ridge line, rocky ridge line, where we thought that the retardant would work. And it happened to be a ridge, and the valley was wide enough where there was easy egress and ingress for those retardant bombers to get in and out of there safely. Prior to that time, when the fire was still lower in the valley or along the lake shore, just didn't have enough room to get the larger retardant bombers in there to be able to climb out of there. So obviously that's a big thing. Can they get in there, first of all, and secondly, can they climb out of there without endangering their lives? So this was the first opportunity to do that. We think if we can be successful there, we can at least delay significantly any movement up valley and or hopefully stop it. And just understand that a retardant line, we sort of refer to that as a check line, and that we don't anticipate something like that to hold for a long period of time, and that it just gives us more time and space. So we're feeling pretty good about where we're standing right now, and this week is going to be cool, moderate, maybe some showers. This week it's supposed to warm back up, but as you know, in this country, in this part of the country, we can go into fire season all the way into October. So we still have a good, month and a half left, but nights are getting longer, days are getting shorter, which all helps with moderating fire behavior.
And Stan, for our listeners, if they're not familiar, the retardant bombers that you're talking about, that's air support, like dropping that Phos-Chek material that's sometimes bright red, and it helps to slow the fire?
That's correct, yeah.
And Stan, is there any worry? Of course, the cooler weather and some showers should help with getting this fire not to be moving so quickly, at least. But is there worry that in that steep terrain that could make things more difficult for your crews, potential for mudslides, things like that?
Yeah, so that's a really good point. Certainly when we had the more extreme kind of weather, heavy rainfall, lightning and wind, and as you know, on the Easy fire, there were some landslides as a result of some severe thunderstorms with I can't remember, but 2 inches of rain within an hour which caused those landslides. So definitely that is a concern. But over this week, we don't anticipate to see those really heavy rainfall amounts, but it should at least, it'll be, shots of rain, and that should impact our ability to work up in that country in terms of, watching out for slides and the like. It's also important to know, especially in that country, and as many people know, the Lake Chelan country has hosted, if you want to say it that way, a lot of fires over the course of the last 15 years. And there is an old burn right where the fire is burning now above Stehekin. So that's good in that it sort of breaks up the vegetation. That's bad in that you've got a lot of snags and snag hazards for firefighters, and that takes a lot of time for us to mitigate those hazards while we're putting in that hand line.
Let's talk a little bit about Stehekin before we go here, Stan. Of course, this is a remote community. You access it by boats, just about 100 or so full-time residents. The fire has burned very close to town there. Can you kind of describe how close has the fire gotten, and how have fire crews been working to protect those buildings?
Yeah, so we do have a fire line above town and above the valley floor. It's mostly a hand line, like 3 feet wide or so, and it is plumbed, which means we've got a hose running the length of that fire line in lateral hoses so that you can hook up nozzles and stuff to wet down the area, and then sprinklers in some locations as well. So the fire, while I wouldn't say that it was immediately threatening any buildings, albeit we did wrap some of the historical buildings with that foil wrap to protect those. And
like a fire retardant foil that you can wrap a building with?
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then many of the homes that are closest to the fire line have sprinkler systems installed, and many of the residences have put in sprinkler systems on their own. And obviously, as you do that, it increases the humidity and moistens the fuel around there. Also, a lot of work with reducing fuels, removing brush and stuff that might cause more difficult to deal with, to handle a fire in and around homes. So it really just creating defensible space around homes. So that's a lot of that work has been ongoing, for the last 3-4 weeks around those places. Should the fire want to get active, at least we've got some good defensible space. We still have the state MOB resources up there, the large engines on standby, and those are the folks that did much of that sort of defensible space work on private property, and Department of Natural Resources engines up there as well as the hand crews and the like. We did actually do some contingency lines or defensible hand lines on the other side of the valley, as again what we were concerned about. So we're just looking at all those contingencies as we think about what this fire could do. So we've identified places where, then let's look at some options for defending the community. And so that work almost has been all completed. There's some cleanup work that's going on. They test pumps and their hose lays daily to make sure, it's operational. I know they drill as well. If a fire made a run, everybody knows what pumps to turn on and where to go and the like. So all of that stuff has been ongoing over the course of the last 2 or 3 weeks since it's been in that level 3.
And Stan, I understand that the evacuation notice was downgraded over the weekend. Can you tell us anything more about that and that decision?
Yeah, that's good news, obviously. So the evacuation level from basically Hazard Creek, Adams Point along the lakeshore, down lake has been downgraded from a 2 to a 1, which allows those private residences and recreation folks to go in, albeit the National Forest and the Park Service still have not opened some of those campgrounds, so some of those still might remain closed. So I would have folks check with the Chelan Ranger District and the Park Service on what campgrounds might have opened up and as those evacuation levels were downgraded. And then north of Hazard Creek, so basically all of Stehekin Landing and the valley was downgraded to a level 2. What's important to know about that, it allows some of the employees of the concessionaires up there at Stehekin and Park Service employees to go back in and get things started up again. But it does not allow visitors to visit Stehekin at this point. There's still a lot of, firefighting equipment around. Still, again, as I mentioned, we're still actively fighting a fire. And so the sheriff and in concert with the incident management team just didn't feel comfortable to go from a 3 to a 1. But that's the aim, continue to get some good work done and continue to evaluate those evacuation levels daily to see when it is safe. And again, really what's on the mind of the Chelan County Sheriff and the incident commander is making sure that before we open it, we want to make sure not only is it safe for the public, but it's safe for firefighters.
Yeah. And just really quickly before we go, we know that a lot of residents of Stehekin had stayed to defend their homes, even under that level 3 evacuation notice. I know it's not recommended. It's not something that fire crews want to see when you issue those evacuation notices. Was there any issue there with residents either getting in the way of fire crews, or were they overall helpful to the firefighting efforts? Any comment you can make on that?
Yeah, no, I don't think there wasn't any issues. In fact, many of those residences were very helpful with the local knowledge they have about that ground up there. So that was very helpful. We also were able to keep employed some of the restaurants and heavy equipment folks that were up there. For example, they were able to provide food for our firefighters. So we contracted with them to do that. And some of the heavy equipment owned by residents up there were also contracted to keep the road open. We had a significant concern from the landing to basically to the end of the lake. I think it's mile and a half. It's very steep. And the fire did burn down to the road. And so we were very concerned about rockfall and logs and debris. So we need to keep that road open because that really is the only ingress and egress for residences in case they did want to leave. We also had another emergency route as well identified. But yes, they chose to stay and protect their homes, which is their right to do that.
And it sounds like if they're staying anyway, they're going to, end up feeding some firefighters and maybe working with the fire crews. So it sounds like even though it's not a recommended course to ignore evacuation orders, that it was a good collaboration for folks who stayed.
Yeah, and it ended up that way. And yes, we would not recommend folks doing that in an evacuation level 3. But since they did choose to stay, they were not a hindrance to our activities up there. And we were able to utilize some of their resources.
Stan Hinatsu is a public information officer with the incident response team on the Pioneer and Easy Fires near Lake Chelan. Easy Fire is a little bit ways north towards the North Cascades Scenic Byway. Thank you so much for being here, Stan, and thank you to all of your fire crews. I know this has been a long haul, and again, as you said, fire season continues. We appreciate all the work you and your colleagues are doing.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. This show is only possible because listeners support us. If you're able to give right now, please check out the show notes for a link to donate. And don't forget, you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m., Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org.
Hi there, I'm Monica Guzman, host of A Braver Way podcast and your guide across the political divide. Are you done with the divisiveness in our politics and ready to do something about it? This season, we've partnered with KUOW to reach more listeners like you. Join me as I sit down with guests from across the political spectrum. Together, we'll share tools, insights, and messy, real-life stories to help you face this election year without losing heart. Listen to A Braver Way now on the KUOW app or wherever you get your podcasts.